It all began on a sunny Tuesday, the type of day perfect for a quiet cup of coffee and the gentle hum of my solar panels working away. But when I stepped through my front door that evening, I was greeted by a scene that shattered my peaceful existence. My state-of-the-art solar panel system lay in ruins, strewn across my yard like fallen soldiers after a battle. Standing over the wreckage with her arms crossed and a smug smile that could curdle milk was Karen, the self-proclaimed queen of our HOA. The sight of her made my blood boil. "You were warned," she said, indignantly shaking her head, as if she savored the chaos she had created. "The HOA doesn't allow unsightly additions." Unsightly? My panels were sleek and modern, blending seamlessly with my roof. Meanwhile, Karen's house resembled an over-decorated theme party from the 1980s, complete with plastic flamingos and an intimidating gnome army guarding her yard. "Are you serious?" I said, trying to suppress the anger coursing through me. "You just destroyed my legally installed property. You know this is illegal, right?" "Illegal?" She scoffed, her voice dripping with condescension. "It's not illegal when the HOA enforces its rules. I have the authority here, Alex. You should have thought twice before going against us." I closed my eyes, counting to 10. The pulse throbbed in my temples, and my fists clenched into tight balls. "What about my money? Who's paying for this?" Karen's grin widened, a sickly sweet smile reminiscent of a cat toying with a mouse. "Not my problem. Maybe next time. Follow the rules." She turned, her heels clicking against the pavement as she sauntered away, leaving me amongst the wreckage of my pride and investment. As darkness settled over the neighborhood, an unsettling realization dawned on me. The HOA boasted heavy regulations, but had no jurisdiction over solar panels in this state. This was not just about the destruction of my property. This was personal. 2 days later, fortified by a resolve that could rival a knight in shining armor, I sat in my home office, a sea of legal documents spread before me. Freshly brewed coffee wafted through the air, but the real high was a discovery that sent a jolt through my veins. The HOA didn't own the power grid supplying our neighborhood. I did. When I bought my house, the land had come attached to a private power system, installed long before the HOA came into existence. Waves of exhilaration washed over me. Karen had meddled with the wrong person, and now I had the ultimate trump card. The gears in my head began to turn. I imagined the night of reckoning, the moment the neighborhood where I felt powerless would finally feel what it was like to be in the dark, led by the very hand that tried to suppress me. I didn't act immediately. Instead, I watched the ego swell in Karen as she savored her so-called victory, all while I carefully crafted my revenge. If she thought she was untouchable, she had another thing coming. That night, as Karen prepared for one of her infamous meetings, always filled with petty complaints and fines, I orchestrated my plan, channeling my inner puppeteer. Everyone in the neighborhood would be present, and I wanted them all to witness Karen's downfall. At precisely 8 p.m., while she prattled on about mailbox colors and lawn gnomes, I pressed the final button on my control panel. It was glorious. The entire neighborhood plunged into darkness. The shockwaves of confusion erupted like fireworks. Shouting voices filled the silent air, replaced by the rhythmic chirping of crickets and the stark reality that Karen had built her castle on shaky ground. I leaned against my front porch, a cold beer in hand, and let the chaos unfurl before me. People stumbled out of their homes, their phones flickering like fireflies as they dialed customer service, desperate for answers. Little did they know, they were witnessing a grand spectacle, one that was every bit calculated, every bit sweet. "What the hell is going on?" Karen's shrill voice broke through the commotion. She gestured wildly, demanding answers from her assistant Richard, who stood fumbling with his phone like a deer caught in headlights. They say there's no outage," he managed to say. A slow smirk crept onto my face. I couldn't resist. Strange, isn't it? An outage that only affects the HOA neighborhood. The crowd fell silent as Karen's eyes narrowed, suspicion boiling beneath the surface. "What do you know about this?" "Oh, just the fact that the power grid here isn't controlled by the city," I casually replied, "but by me." In that instant, realization seeped into the crowd. Karen's face twisted from confusion to disbelief, her preparations for dominance crumbling piece by piece. "You're lying," she screamed, but I merely pulled out my phone, showcasing the scanned property deed that proved my ownership of the power grid. The gasps spread like wildfire. The whispers of the crowd revealed the beginning of Karen's undoing. No, no, no. You own the grid. Richard's voice shook. With a triumphant grin, I declared, yes. And it seems you're out of luck, Karen. Everyone has power now, except you. The crowd erupted into a storm of murmurs, like leaves caught in a wildfire. Karen stood frozen in place, her arrogance withering as she processed that the power she thought she wielded had slipped from her fingers. Turn it back on, she shrieked, all regal authority gone, replaced by a desperate plea. I took my time, savoring this moment. No, but I'll make you a deal. I'll turn it back on if, I pause for effect, you personally replace every single solar panel you destroyed, and you resign as HOA president tonight. An uncomfortable silence hung in the air. The crowd could sense the tension mounting, transforming into a thrilling spectacle of retribution. Are you serious? Karen spluttered, betrayed by her minions who stood behind her now, betraying their queen. Yes, I replied, a gleam of satisfaction in my eyes. The votes would fall with a simple show of hands, and Karen knew it. Let's vote, Jeff, a recently fined neighbor, said, crossing his arms defiantly. The HOA tyranny was no longer tolerated. Karen's face twisted in horror. This is madness. You can't do this to me. With the stage set for a showdown, I stood, waiting. The moment had arrived for Karen to face her reckoning. It was time to see who truly held the power in this cul-de-sac. As whispers turned into shouted endorsements for her downfall, I felt the exhilarating thrill of revenge coursing through me. Karen had messed with the wrong guy, and now she was about to learn the true meaning of powerlessness. Karen had messed with the wrong guy, and now she was about to learn the true meaning of powerlessness. A vote right now. Jeff bellowed, and the crowd rallied behind him, murmuring in agreement. The once terrified neighbors transformed into a united front, emboldened by the prospect of standing up to Karen's reign. Who's in favor of Karen resigning as the HOA president? Jeff asked, his voice steady, eyes fixed on the sea of faces around him. One by one, hands shot up, punctuated by nervous laughter and the thrill of newfound courage. Karen's face twisted in a grimace of disbelief. You ungrateful traitors, she shouted, but the momentum had shifted. This is a mistake. A woman shouted back, you had your chance to lead us. You used your position to bully us. Every word felt like a blow to Karen, her grip on power slipping through her fingers as frustration broke down her defenses. The tide of dissent surged forward, and it was exhilarating to witness. I stood back, sipping my beer, and let the excitement wash over me. This was a moment that wouldn't just alter my life, it would reshape the neighborhood. If Karen thought she was going to silence me forever, she had another thing coming. When the final vote was tallied, the majority had spoken loud and clear. Yes, Karen. Resign. They cheered, emboldened by the realization that they could reclaim their community. Karen's composure cracked as shock morphed into desperation. You can't be serious, she yelled, but the laughter and jeers of the crowd drowned her out. The last remnants of her authority evaporated, leaving her standing alone in the dark, a figure of mocked grandeur. I don't know what you all think you're doing, she spat, pointing at me. You're making a huge mistake. Not a mistake, I replied coolly. A choice. And the choice is to live without you at the helm. With that, I pulled my phone out one last time, ready to press the button that would restore power to the entire neighborhood, except Karen's house. Her eyes widened in horror as the lights flickered on around us, illuminating the faces of her former followers glowing with renewed hope. Turn my power back on. This is illegal, she shrieked, desperation dripping from her every word. Illegal? I asked, feigning innocence. I just supplied power to everyone else. Your lack of electricity is not my doing. Maybe it's a sign that you should reconsider your approach to neighborhood leadership. As her pleas fell on deaf ears, I felt a sense of vindication settle over me. The night had shifted from chaos to catharsis, and I savored every moment. Let's get out of here, guys, a neighbor called, arms raised as lights flickered back to life, casting shadows on Karen's defeated figure. We have a barbecue to celebrate. Finally, We can decorate our homes without fear. I watched as the crowd began to disperse, laughter echoing down the street. With her power stripped away, Karen turned on her heel, her earlier bravado replaced by the weight of despair. I could see the gears turning in her mind, but there was nothing left for her to hold on to. The queen of the cul-de-sac, stripped of her title, marched toward her dark house, a silhouette against the backdrop of her neighbors reclaiming their joy. I couldn't resist one last jab. "Watch out for the gnomes on your way out, Karen." A couple of neighbors chuckled, and the laughter only fueled her anger. She shot me a steely glare, but I could see the flicker of realization in her eyes as she finally understood the extent of her mistakes. As the crowd dispersed toward my house, I felt a rush of excitement wash over me. I had not only fought back against tyranny, but had ignited a spark of resistance within my neighbors. The barbecue planning began to take shape, and soon enough, the smell of grilling burgers filled the air, an aroma of freedom. People who had lived under the heavy thumb of Karen's paranoia were now mingling as friends, sharing ideas about personal gardens and festive decorations, no longer fearful of fines or constraints. "Hey, Alex," a neighbor called out, breaking my reverie. "You think you could show us how to run our own solar panels? We all want to make sure that doesn't happen again." "Definitely," I replied, my heart soaring. "I'll help you set it up. Maybe we can form a neighborhood project to provide energy solutions for everyone, together." The idea took root in my mind, but I hadn't anticipated what happened next. As I grilled and laughed, Karen burst through her front door, out of breath and livid. "You think you can just unseat me and walk away unscathed?" Her voice trembled with fury, but it was too late. The neighbors gathered around, ready to stand with me. "What's done is done, Karen. You lost our trust long ago," one of them called out, arms crossed defiantly. Karen's face flushed scarlet. "I'll get my power back, you'll see." "Not without my say-so," I said, stepping forward boldly. "Remember that deed? This neighborhood runs on my power, not your threats." With gritted teeth, she turned away. As the crowd watched her retreat, I knew this was far from over. The remnants of her reign scattered like the ashes of her authority, and I felt victorious, yet sensed a storm brewing. Was she really done fighting? Or would Karen find a way to claw back into control? However this ended, the echoes of her defeat tonight would not erase the whispers of revenge bubbling beneath the surface. I needed to prepare for what was coming next. A plan began to form in my mind, one that would solidify our community against the impending challenge. Little did she know, she just stepped into an awakening that none of us would soon forget. Little did she know, she just stepped into an awakening that none of us would soon forget. The night faded into a cool tranquility. The laughter of my neighbors echoed in the background as I savored the volatile thrill of victory. Yet, something nagged at me, a sensation deep in my gut whispering that this confrontation was just the beginning. Karen was not the type to retreat quietly into the shadows. The next morning, I'd barely sipped my coffee when the doorbell rang. A ripple of anxiety coursed through me. I opened the door to find Jeff, his expression serious. "Hey, I just wanted to warn you. Karen's outside, again." "Again?" I glanced over my shoulder at the idyllic view of my front yard, now tranquil and inviting. "What's she doing?" "She's talking to a lawyer," Jeff said, fear and uncertainty lining his voice. "I overheard her say something about taking you to court." I sighed, leaning against the doorframe. "She wouldn't dare. She knows the Lord doesn't support her." "Yeah, but I think she's desperate enough to try," he replied. "We all saw what went down last night. She's not letting this go easily." As if on cue, I turned to see Karen pacing her lawn. She looked almost frantic, waving her arms and gesturing emphatically. My heart sank. I needed to confront her before she stirred up any more trouble. I stepped out onto the porch, calling out, "Karen, what are you doing?" She whirled around, her eyes blazing. "I'm getting my life back, Alex. You think this ends here? You stole my power, literally and figuratively, and I'm not just going to stand by while you embarrass me in front of everyone. Is that what this is about?" I asked, trying to keep my tone even. "Embarrassment? You destroyed my property. This neighborhood is better off without your reign of terror." She laughed bitterly, waving off my words. You think this is going to intimidate me? You might hold the power grid now, but I have the HOA. You know what that means. I can cause you headaches that you can't even imagine. The nerves in my stomach twisted tighter. What headaches? You have no authority here. Everyone knows you on shaky ground. I have friends in high places, she shot back, her bravado giving way to desperation. I'll contact every owner of this HOA land. I'll get them all riled up against you. They'll listen to me. Before I could respond, a couple of neighbors peeked from their doors, sensing the tension. Just leave, Karen, one of them called. You don't belong here anymore. We don't want your drama, another chimed in, and I felt a surge of support wash over me. Her face twisted with rage. You all will regret this. I'll make sure of it. With one last glare directed at me, she stormed back to her house, flinging the door open as if to slam it against the world. I felt a chill creep up my spine. Yet, as quickly as a thundercloud appeared, the ambience shifted back to light laughter and camaraderie. I walked back into my home, trying to shake off the unease. The day wore on, and despite the warm sun, my thoughts were heavy with concern. If Karen really did have allies, I needed to fortify our new alliance. I suggested a meeting for the neighborhood that evening to discuss strategies moving forward. When night fell, the gathering began. Neighbors filtered in, some bringing food and drinks, excited chatter overlapping into a symphony of hope. I could see how eager they were to keep the momentum going, an energy I craved to channel. Thanks for coming, everyone, I said, standing in the center of the living room that quickly filled with familiar faces. We need to be prepared for anything Karen might throw our way. Unity is our strongest weapon. Jeff stepped forward. It's true. We can't let her luxurious threats intimidate us. What can we do to make sure she doesn't rise again? Education is key, I replied. We need to understand our rights as homeowners so we can act swiftly if she tries to rally the HOA against us. Agreed. Someone chimed in from the back. And let's start talking about our solar solutions. The conversation flowed, ideas bouncing off the walls, plans forming like a solid wall against Karen's impending doom. As we talked late into the night, I felt the resolve among us grow thicker. Each laugh, each cheer, fueled the spark of unity, and soon, we all stood as one, ready to defend the newfound freedom we had fought for. But as the night waned and the laughter faded, I glanced at the window, feeling that something was still looming on the horizon. Karen wouldn't just lie down. I had to be a step ahead. The following day, armed with the energy from our planning session, I hit the books. I dove deep into local laws, property rights, and HOA regulations. I spoke with professionals about structural concerns, diving into the logistics of how HOA power and private property intersected. The more I dug, the more I empowered myself, and a wicked plan began to take shape. Then came the day when my phone buzzed with a new message, startling me from my thoughts. It was a text from Jeff, filled with ominous news. Karen's back. She's here to talk to you. I stepped outside to face her once and for all. My heart raced, not with fear but anticipation. What do you want, Karen? I called out, my voice firm. I want to make a deal, she replied, a new, calmer edge to her tone. Let's talk about how we can work together instead of tearing each other apart. Curiosity piqued. I could hardly believe my ears. Work together. After everything you've pulled. Let's not act like children, she snapped, her earlier bravado replaced with an unusual sincerity. I can help you with that solar system you want to install, with some concessions, of course. This is a joke, right? Why would I trust you? I shot back, eyebrows raised in skepticism. She hesitated, searching for the right words. Because I can help you navigate the HOA. Alex. We could settle our differences, avoid legal battles, and stabilize this neighborhood together. Stabilize? You mean stay in control? I shot back, unwilling to let my guard down. Call it what you want. Just think about it, she said, her voice tinged with desperation. We can both win, if you don't dismiss this outright. I took a step back, crossing my arms. This was the very definition of a double-edged sword. I'll think about it, Karen. But know this, you're on thin ice. One wrong move, and I'm not just shutting off the power, I'm exposing every little thing you've done. With that, she scowled but nodded, her determination as palpable as my own. The lines had been drawn, and it was clear we were ricocheting toward a collision course. Would I gamble on the possibility of collaboration? Or would I prepare to protect my community from yet another storm brewing? The seeds of a new strategy had been planted, and as I stepped back onto my porch, the weight of the choices ahead hung heavy in the air. One way or another, both Karen and I were about to find out just how much power lay in unity or manipulation. One way or another, both Karen and I were about to find out just how much power lay in unity or manipulation. After our tense conversation, I retreated inside, my head spinning with possibilities. Trusting her felt like inviting a snake into my garden, while ignoring her overture might provoke a greater conflict. I needed to weigh my options, but one thing was certain, I would be prepared. The meeting with my neighbors had infused me with newfound weight, and I excitedly shared my findings. I gathered my closest allies, including Jeff, and mapped out a strategy in case Karen retaliated. We'd draft unconventional proposals for the HOA meeting, outlining comprehensive community plans that included our energy solutions, creating a proposal that would not only solidify our gains but also showcase our unity against her manipulations. The day came for the HOA meeting, and as I stepped into the crowded room, I was struck by the overwhelming number of eyes looking my way, all filled with anticipation. Karen was already seated at the front, her demeanor poised, seemingly unfazed by the discontent swirling in the air. I took my place next to Jeff, and my neighbors rallied behind us. As the meeting began, the usual small talk was quickly overshadowed by reports of complaints against Karen's actions. Her attempts to rally support had only backfired. Her authority now hung by a thread. I stood to present our collective resolution, aware that every word I spoke would shape the future of our neighborhood. Fellow neighbors, I started, my voice steady as I held up the proposal. We stand here together to reclaim our community. We know the values we cherish, respect, empathy, and the promise that every voice matters. Cheers rang out, and I felt the adrenaline surge through me. Our proposal outlines a collaborative approach to HOA governance, with a shared energy solution that will not just empower our homes but bind our community together. I glanced momentarily at Karen. She was seething, her jaw clenched tightly, but I pressed on. We want transparency, fairness, and input from every resident, the way it should have always been. This is how we build a future together. The room filled with approving murmurs. Karen interjected, attempting to dismiss our resolution. This is reckless. You can't possibly think you can govern without strong leadership. Leadership doesn't mean deception, I shot back, ready for her attack. It means listening to your neighbors, not terrorizing them. The crowd erupted with applause and cheers. The tide was turning. Karen stood, fists clenched, but as she glanced around the room for support, the realization hit her. She had none. Enough, she shouted, her voice cracking. You haven't seen the last of me. I'll fight you in every way possible, and you'll regret this. The meeting concluded with mock excitement over our proposal. I knew Karen's threats would continue to loom, but I also understood that we had each other, and that mattered more. The following days took on a jubilant atmosphere throughout the neighborhood. We began implementing our solar initiatives and encouraging one another in projects that brought us closer. Our community thrived as we participated in gardening projects and shared tips on maintenance, laughter echoing as our fears drifted away. But my resolve to keep an eye on Karen never waned. I stayed alert, waiting for her next move. Then one evening, as I worked in my backyard, I spotted a dim light flickering in her home. My instincts fled. Something was off. When I approached with cautious curiosity, I noticed several strangers milling about her house, the glow of construction lights illuminating their hurried work. They were dismantling the fence between our properties. I charged toward her front door, adrenaline racing, knocking hard. Karen, what's going on? I yelled, my heart pounding. She swung open the door, a victorious smile plastered across her face. Just preparing to renovate. I think it's time my home had a makeover, a much-needed one, of course. Renovate or sabotage? I shot back, glaring. You can't just perform construction on the shared property line without proper notice. I can do whatever I want, she snapped, stepping closer. Besides, maybe if I make myself the grandest house on the block, your little neighborhood movement will fall flat. Before I could respond, my neighbors began gathering at the edge of her property. Uniting once more, we confronted her together. This isn't just your property. We're all in this community. You can't keep treating us this way. Jeff shouted, the crowd echoing his sentiment. The flames of her defiance flickered before an unexpected tremor of doubt crossed her face. You think you can intimidate me, she scoffed, but she took a step back, glancing at the gathered crowd. If you continue this, we will take it to the HOA. They won't support your actions. I asserted, emboldened by the solidarity. Her bravado began to waver. Stay out of my business, Alex. Your business affects all of us, I countered. This is a community, not a dictatorship. You want change? Then join us rather than creating chaos. Karen hesitated, but the realization that her power had crumbled began to dawn on her. With no supportive allies and surrounded by our united front, her defenses shattered. I just wanted to showcase that I could be a strong leader. Strength isn't about control, I replied, softer now. It's about lifting each other up. The flicker of anger in her eyes cooled, vulnerability cracking through her wrath. Unseen emotions danced behind her gaze, and the tension hung thick between us, an opportunity for change. What if, she whispered, barely audible, I stopped this madness and worked with you? The power of her words hung in the air, unexpected and poignant. It was a truce I had never anticipated. I looked at my neighbors, then back to Karen, weighing the moment. If you can genuinely commit to the community, I began, allowing a small thread of hope to shine through, then we'll welcome you. With reluctance and vulnerability, she nodded. The shadows that once clouded her ledges began to clear, and for the first time, she looked not like my opponent, but as a shattered part of our community, ready to piece herself back together. Together, I said, my voice steady. We can rebuild, inside and out. As the sun dipped below the horizon, we witnessed a flicker of change within Karen. A new beginning awaited us amid the remnants of discord. Dare we call it hope? In that moment, I found something akin to forgiveness somewhere unexpected, and freedom blossomed in its place.